Okay, so documentation. So obviously I work for Story Park, and that's kind of how it came together. I know Anne talked about that earlier. So what I did is that I created a learning set in Story Park from the different domains and areas, etc., and to support teachers in lots of different ways, I suppose. So one is when you're taking a story, so basically what you're doing is you're picking out the main learning in regards to the EKI guide when you're writing your learning story. And so what I did with one centre when they were doing their professional development is that I got them to run a report, and what this did was picked up on all the learning tags that they had been using in their learning stories, and what it showed was that they'd been writing lots of great stories, but what they had been focusing on in their stories around the EKI guide was just the learning about nature and learning in nature. And so this was a real wake-up call for them, that they realised that actually they needed to look more deeply at what was happening and how they were supporting the learning around the in and the for. So that was a really good way of evaluating their teaching practices and what they were writing about. I know when I've written stories around the nature learning that's been happening, when I wrote my story and then I looked back at the points around the different four domains, and I could see that I could draw more out when I was writing. It made me look more deeply and think back more deeply about the learning that was happening. So I was then able to go back and review my story, and I felt make it a bit more deep and complex, I suppose, than rather sometimes the surface stuff. It just made me think more deeply about the learning that was happening. And then another way that I've used them is in a professional dialogue with a teacher, and we were looking at one of her stories. I had made a reflective questions list from the guide, and that we went through these questions, and then she was able to then go through her story and again pull out ways that she might be able to deepen that story, things that she hadn't really thought about before. But what she also did then is just going, next time I go back into our bush excursion, these are some of the things I could do to be more supportive of the children's learning. So it's thinking about the language that she was using when children brought up particular things, taking more time. But, it gave her more opportunity. When she went back, she was able to be more prepared and to go more deeply into things. Another thing we've done is compared your curriculum, your mandated curriculum, to the EKI guide, so you can see where there are similarities and crossovers, and potentially maybe where there are gaps in your mandated curriculum compared with the EKI guide, so it can support you in that way as well. In the documentation process, it's also probably helped me change my practice. I was writing one story about a child who, it was actually my grandson, but he had been following the water in the gutter, and he realised that it wasn't raining one day when we continued to see this water in the gutter, and he realised that, hey, this wasn't right. And so he was starting to ask questions about where the water came from, and probably, normally I'd been in a hurry and I would have just kept walking on. It was like, no, we need to go and find out. So we walked back up to see where the water was coming from, and we found that there was a leak in the footpath. And so he kept pushing, so it was like, okay, we need to now go and find someone who can, fix this. And so we rang the city council, and eventually we came back another week and somebody was actually fixing the broken Toby. So seeing that, your practice can make a difference. But then also, one day we again went through this drain, and he was finding that there was a lot of rubbish that was sitting on top of the drain, and he was concerned about where this might be going. And so again, I had to change my practice, and and it's like, okay, so we actually need to pick up this rubbish and put it in the rubbish bin. So his actions have actually changed my actions, and thinking more deliberately about the things that I do, because I know I need to be a mentor for the children as well, and show that my practice is changing too.